Oh, shoutout ulit. CNN, Brainless Nobody, Kana, Russell's Dad, Cesa, Mayo, Simple Lalani, Notski, Bro Ronald Sulijon, Vito Joe, Carolace, Abelardo, The Alpha, Perf, Monsavior, Enbray, Grace, Veer, Soybe Music, Green Rose, Albert Solano. Faye, Sapphire, Jom, Green Rose, Albert, Rizamar, JF, Gershom, Obscure, Avic. Yo, let's go. Oh, ito kay Tito Sen. Sa sobrang confusing nung crossover na yan, lahat may kanya-kanyang understanding. Hindi naman siya hindi siya confusing Tamo kailangan mo lang ihiwalay isang system and second system. Bakit? If you're going to go strict logic, it is clear. When we say carry over, ibig sabihin continue, right? It will continue. Okay? Meaning, ito lang yung buong idea. The idea is conviction muna o quorum. 12 matanggal, 12 bago, right? Ngayon, actually naghahanap ako ng argument sa kabilang side na they can attack the argument without actually using the court as an analogy. Bakit? Because it's a false analogy. It's comparing orange sa apples. Bakit? Unang-una, judge can actually change judges sa korte. Kasi meron silang mechanism to actually i-transfer yung evidence, yung transcript, lahat-lahat yon, may mechanism sila doon. Okay? Sa impeachment o sa Senate, walang ganong klaseng mechanism. Sa pagko-compare, kapag gagawa ka ng analogy, kailangan mong tingnan yung relevant similarities. Okay? But in order for you to make that analogy successful argument for your point, kailangan walang relevant dissimilarities. The number one relevant dissimilarities para mag-collapse yung equivalence mo, yung analogy mo, is the transfer of evidence, the transmittal of evidence. Hindi pwedeng sabihin ng isang senator na, well, nabasa ko na yung transcript. Ito, nakita ko lahat ng evidence. Walang ganon. Sa korte, merong ganon. So, meron silang mechanism mismo na ganon. So, ngayon, paano mo ngayon gagawin yon kung wala kang ganong mechanism? Ibig sabihin, false analogy kagad. Meaning, hindi papasa yung analogy mo sa korte. Ngayon, pangalawang point. When you use analogy, you are using inductive reasoning. Meaning, kumukuha ka ng malapit or baka tama instead of arguing it directly. Kasi, arguing from analogy is actually an indirect proof. Indirect proof. Paano siya naging indirect proof? Alam mo yung reductio ad absurdum. That's an indirect proof. Nagets nyo? Kasi, hindi mo pinoprove directly kung doon sa letter or doon sa argument mismo na mali yun. Gumagawa ka ng way para sabihin indirectly na mali yun. So, meaning, yung pag-analogize is actually an indirect proof. Alam to ng mga mathematician. Ano ba si birthday boy? Susako? Susako Chrono. Paliwanag mo nga sa kanila. Andiyan ba si Mark? It's not about the transmittal of evidence, but the quantum of evidence doesn't change when changing judge. The same rule of evidence applies. All right, team replay. Hello, boss ka, Yunotski. So, yun yung, ang issue dito is yung dissimilarities. Okay? Kaya hindi mo pwedeng i-compare yung dalawa. Okay? You are removing the alternative. No. I'm not. No. I'm not removing the alternative. Kapag unang-una ha. Ito, ulitin natin. Alam natin na sui generis to, di ba? Sui generis. One of its own kind. One of its kind. Unique. Meaning, if you're going to use analogy, tapos ka na. Bakit? Unique nga eh. So kapag kinompare mo siya sa court, edi may kaparehas na. So hindi na siya unique. Not that unique ah. Sui generis idea. The sui generis means, parang ganito. If you're arguing for the existence of God, you use analogies too. Right? Because God is sui generis too. I guess nyo? Ayun yung argument ni Aquinas talaga na all you can do is to actually to do analogies. Alvin Villarosa, shout out sa inyo. Naintindihan nyo yun, right? So may dissimilarities kagad na mechanism na pwede mag-take over yung judges. Pero sa impeachment, you cannot just replace them. Yan din usapan namin sa Discord, same analogy. Unique, keep on rolling. Perf, nagiging toxic ka na. Nagiging toxic ka na, pre. Keep on rolling. What? You loving this shit right here. LIMP biscuits right here. Let's go. Sui generis nga eh. Once you use an analogy, that's an indirect proof. That's not a direct proof. Okay? Let's go. Let's go.
Ng 20-year
Different R&R.
Congress ang impeachment trial ni Vice President Sara Duterte kapag hindi natapos ang kasalukuyang Kongreso.
Sa impeachment rules, kailangan tapusin.
Yes, okay.
Kailangan tapusin yung impeachment. Yung Senate rules na nagsasabi, based on the Constitution, na pag adjourn sinindi kayo, lahat ng business nyo patay.
That's an internal rule. Okay? Yung pag-adjourn. So, ba't magagalit yung mga yung mga taga-bundok? Hindi, yung mga taga-lower house. Ba't magagalit? Yun nga yung reasoning ni Yun yung reasoning mismo ni Chis Escudero.
Say, justiciable issue, pwede dalhin sa Supreme Court.
Pwede nga. But here's the problem. Sui generis. Political. Okay? Ito sunod. Sana matuloy ang impeachment para mapakita ni VP Sara kung sino talaga ang corrupt. Parang administrative rules. Ganun.
Hindi natatapos ang isang impeachment proceeding na nakahain na sa Senado. At ihambing natin ito sa isang kaso sa korte.
See? I told you. Once na umalis ka sa internal rules to argue your point at kumuha ka ngayon ng analogy, we're done. Because that's an indirect proof. Tapos na usapan dyan. Sui generis nga eh. So kapag kumuha ka ng analogy, what are you trying to prove? Right? Yung pag-change ng judges. Okay? Munta nga, pwede mo ba iakyat Supreme Court yan? Di hindi parang kaso sa korte. Ambiguous na. one class of itself, so hindi logical gamitin ng court precedents. Exactly. Kaya anong kaya ano ka pa lang kay Coco Pimentel, wala na. I'm sorry, you are using analogy now. Because once you use analogy, you are resorting to an inductive method of proving things. Kasi I can use a lot of analogies to make that point. Right? Alam mo, for example, ganito. Ang kumpanya kapag namatay yung founder or yung pinakamataas na shareholders, hindi titigil yung kumpanya. Tuloy-tuloy pa rin. O di ba? I just did it too. Pero question, nandun ba yung relevant similarities? Nandun ba yung relevant dissimilarities? Again, ang importante sa analogy, kung true analogy yan, then it means wala kang makikitang major or relevant dissimilarity. Kapag meron tayong nakitang major dissimilarity, then your whole point on the analogy collapses. Kaya tayo may false analogy. Nagigets nyo? Nagigets nyo yung point? Kaya tayo may false analogy because of that, or yung false equivalence. Kasi, ang gusto mo kasing gawin is, gusto mong i-equate yung isang bagay sa kabila. It's like trying, kapag ka orange, tama ganito, ganito. Ito, siguro ma-explain ko sa inyo ito mas maganda. Doon galing yung salitang comparing apples to oranges. Bakit? You can actually compare them by their fruit. Nakakain sila. May balat. Pero can you actually compare them? Because if that is your standard of comparing, then I can actually compare you with a dog. Why? You have eyes. You're a living thing. You have legs. Nakita nyo na yung point. Kasi kung yun yung standard mo ng comparing, then we have a problem. Because we can compare anything to anything. That's why it's an inductive proof. And that is also why you have to make sure that the relevant similarities are there and there are no relevant or important dissimilarity. Kasi kung yun nga mismo galing yung comparing apples to oranges eh. It's a fallacy. Kasi you can actually compare the two if you want. This is a fruit. May seed may seed. Nakakain, edible. There it is. There's your comparison. Different categories yan kaya sui generis nga eh. Kaya nga, once you actually use like analogies, wala na, suspect na. Because it only proves that you cannot actually prove it directly. Exactly, kahit taho pwede kong i-compare sa bakla. Di ba? Kahit taho pwede kong compare sa bakla, pwede. Oh. Kaya ito, yung argument na yan, wala na yan. Kaya nga naghanap ako ng argument against sa argument ni Tolentino. Naiipit sila sa fact na judicial exercise to so in-apply nila legal conditions. Well, yun ang problema. Are you going to go full-blown judicial Yan ang problema eh. Kino-conflate nila yung dalawang idea. Kino-conflate nila yung Senate rules, which is some of them ay inadapt galing sa judicial side. Pero that adoption doesn't make them equal. Nai-guess nyo? Kapag ako inadapt ko yung system ng judicial side at nasa legislative ako, nilagay ko ngayon sa Senate rules, it doesn't mean judicial ako. Nagigets nyo? Inadapt ko lang yon. Pero hindi ibig sabihin judicial ako. Siguro sa tingin mo, maganda yung idea yon. Okay, fine. Pero, ang pagkakaiba nun, thinking sa Senate rules, na a-adapt ko tong rules na to sa judicial side, kasi separate yan eh. Separate yan. Nag-ano lang sa kanila is constitution. Constitution lang talaga ano ba sa kanila? Nagguglo sa kanila, the constitution. Yun lang nagguglo sa kanila. Okay. So may procedure. May dapat gawin. Okay? Inadapt ko ngayon sa judicial. Legislative ako. Right? So inadapt ko ngayon yung tingin ko maganda. Kailangan ko ilagay sa rules. Right? Pero kung sasabihin mo ngayon, teka. We can actually compare the court system pag napalitan yung judges. But the problem is, it's not in the rule. Kahit anong sabihin mo pa dyan na we should compare it to the court system, is not in the freaking rule. It's a good idea. Okay, fine. Ang argument lang na naisip ko kay Tolentino about the 12 na matitira from 19 is a 5 re-election is. So 17 pa din kaso mas lalong futile exercise. Not only that, maybe you can argue that kasi sabihin mo na they witnessed the first sa day 1 hanggang sa day ano. But ang sinasabi is yung composition, right? Yung composition na nandun. So ngayon, manunumpa pa lang na panibago tong 12 eh. So how do you reconcile that? Congress or specifically the Senate somehow is like private company. It has its own rules and regulation applicable only to them. Pero yun nga yung point. Naigas nyo ba yung point? Huwag nyo i-confuse yung inadapt nila sa legislative na kinuha nila sa judicial, it doesn't make them the same as the judicial. Right? Okay? Ngayon, may mga good ideas sila nakikita sa standard doon sa korte. That's why they adapt it and they put it in the rules. But the problem is you keep using the court system as your analogy, but it's not in the freaking rule. Kung papayagan nila yung 17 from 19 Congress matitira 2028, tulang mag-quit tapos na yung 2/3 nila. So, yeah. It's also a futile exercise at this point. Dapat talaga gumawa na lang sila ng ibang rule with their own justification. They can make that rule if they want. But here's the problem. So gagawa sila lang rule na pwede. Pwede, di ba? Pwede natin gawin yan. Pwede mag-carry over yan. Kahit sa new. Ano nang tingin ngayon ito? Parang, anong ginagawa nyo kay VP Sara? Bakit for some reason, dito nyo ginawa to sa issue na to? And not only that, yung ginawa nyong rules is hindi pabor kay VP na yun yung accused. Well, you can argue na, well, we're not the court. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. Pero highly politicized na yan. Kaya nga sabi ni Chis Escudero, we're not gonna change rules unnecessarily para lang mapagbigyan kasi ayaw nilang masabihan na may violation sila or sinadya yan or ginanyan yan, blah blah blah, right? Applying some judicial protocols doesn't make them a judicial body. Kung gumamot ako ng aso, still doesn't make me a vet. Correct. Klaro ba? Klaro ba? Klaro ba? Tuloy natin. Ito wala tong kwenta dahil ano to, hindi yung tao yung argumento niya sa court system kasi analogy yon. Hindi mo pwedeng i-adapt yun basta-basta na wala kang rules. Kumbaga sa system mo, it doesn't allow it. Kumbaga, wala siyang memory. Walang memory yung system mo to actually adapt that swapping of judges shit. Okay? It's not in your system, it's not in your rules. Kumbaga, parang ganito yan, gumawa ka lang ng system. These are the rules. Okay? Sa mga programmers, alam nyo dapat to. Sa mga programmers, alam nyo dapat to. These are the rules, dude. Okay. Kahit anong appeal mo sa labas, it's not in the rules. How can you execute it? You cannot. You have to make your own rules now. You have to put it in the T propositions or system mo. Kailangan mong i-add yun as rule. Right? Naintindihan nyo, napakasimple lang nito, ba't hindi nyo maintindihan? It's not in the rule. Syntax sa programming, boss. Yes, syntax. It's not on your axioms eh. So ngayon, mapipilitan ka ngayon magdagdag sa system mo ng rule. Pero unlike sa programmer, ikaw yung naglalagay ng rule. Sa Senado, lahat sila magbobotohan sa rule. Gets nyo? Pagbobotohan nila yan. Hindi sila pwedeng basta-basta maglagay lang ng rule. Parang ang gustong palabasin dapat ko. Yun na nga, yun yung way 18 ba yun? Yung follower naman natin yun. Pero yun yung gusto niyang gawin. Kaya sinasabi ko sa kanya, hindi yan common sense. It might be intuitive for you to do that. Yes, that's common sense. But don't tell me that's logical. It's not. You cannot even derive it sa mga system mo. Tama, ganito lang yung technique dyan eh. You have a set of rules, right? Ngayon, yung set of rules na yon, that implies something na hidden rule, right? Nag-guess nyo? Naintindihan nyo yun? Kapag naglagay ka ng set ng information or rules, magkikreate yan because of that collection of rules that will create a hidden rule. Or an unstipulated rule. You can derive it there. That's fine. You can derive it there. But once umalis ka do sa rule mo, and then kumuha ka ngayon ng analogy sa labas, we're done. Naintindihan nyo? Sana nagigets nyo yun? Na pinasimple ko na lang, parang you have a system. Kumbaga, my camera, like here, my camera, may set siya ng features kung anong kaya niyang gawin. Kapag ka nag-update ka, yung kaya niya lang din gawin, yung ayon lang din sa mga set of rules niya dati, you can infer from those rules yung unwritten rule. You can do that, of course. But you cannot do something outside do sa mga set of rules na. Pwede mong gayahin pero hindi mo pwedeng gawin arbitrarily. Pero pag sinabi mong gagayahin mo, ilalagay mo sa rules, right? Kumbaga sa programming is wala yun doon, ilagay mo. Pero hindi mo pwedeng paganahin yung isang system nang wala yun tapos gusto mong gawin niya yun. You cannot do that. Si Dodge the Damn Lies, waiting yun. Oh yeah, okay. May axioms. Okay, tuloy natin to. Kaya ito, walang kwenta yung argument niya. Kapag nag-use ka na ng analogy sa korte, we're done. Panibagong rules, of course.
Tapos,
At yun yung sinasabi sa kanila. Create the damn rule. You can create that rule yourself.
isang impeachment proceeding na nakahain na
Kayo, map up operation na lang yan. The real battle was already won during the election. Yeah.
sa Senado. At ihambing natin ito sa isang kaso sa korte. Once a case is filed with the trial court, the judge may retire, the judge may get promoted,
Yeah.
but the case stays on with the trial court.
But yung evidence is nandun pa rin. Lahat ng transcript, lahat yung mga yon, yung lahat ng mga nandoon is evidence-based sila, right? Transmit, may mechanism din na to transmit it. Listening while hugasin. Parang teacher and police juries, teacher rules sa loob ng school. Police rules sa labas, hindi pwedeng basta na lang pumasok. Police sa loob ng school. Gumawa na si Tito noon, pero wala pa yang tatawid.
Ayon kay Senator-elect Tito Sotto na dati rin naging Senator Judge sa impeachment trial ni dating Chief Justice Renato Corona, titigil ang lahat ng proseso ukol sa impeachment trial kapag natapos ang 19th Congress sa June 30.
Nakita mo yung pinost ni sa ex ni Senator, hindi eh.
Sa impeachment trial kapag natapos ang 19th Congress sa June 30. Sabi naman ni House Prosecutor Lawrence Defensor, ang matatapos lang sa June 30 ay ang legislative power nila at hindi ang tungkulin nila sa impeachment trial.
Like for example na ito, di ba katulad nga nung sinabi ko doon sa video ko, theoretically, pwede mag-carry over. Bakit? Kasi may 12 senators pa nga na pwede mag-judge at magtuloy. Pero ang problema nga, it cannot create a quorum and convict. And that's why, kung ang point mo lang is, can it carry over? Technically, it can. But it's actually a useless exercise. Kaya nga, kailangan tapusin yan nito nung 19th Congress. Ayaw gagawa ng bagong rules kasi mas lalong tatagal. Gusto shortcut na lang. Hindi pwede common sense dyan. We're talking about a vice president na gusto tanggalin sa pwesto. Hindi pwedeng ganun. ChatGPT and Attorney Makalintal na hindi na pwedeng ituloy yung impeachment sa 28th Congress kasi nasa Senate rules ang nasa Constitution. Hindi ko alam yan. Sino nag-send? May nag-send ba?
Lunes, June 3.
Ang argument din dyan is yung kikreate ng rules is dapat lahat ng nasa 19. Correct, yun pa. O sabi mo kasi may isang issue. Ang issue is, okay, yung gagawa ng rules dapat nasa 19 Congress, right? Kasi yun nga yung isa sa mga issue na, teka, hindi naman kami pumayag dyan sa rules na yan. Bakit mo kami pipilitin sa 28th Congress? Hindi kasi kami yung kasama dyan. Tama? O di hiwalay natin yung ano na yun. Okay, 12. So ngayon, lahat ng mga yon is dapat yun din yung tatapos. Sila rin, right? O ngayon, i-argue mo. Okay, yung mga electionist, nandun naman. Right? Sabihin na natin, o nga, ituloy nga natin. Pero ano itutuloy natin yung mga nandun lang? So, doon sa pwesto ngayon ng mga nanalo, kasi ang ginawa kong argument doon sa hypothetical ko is walang re-elected eh. You make the rules from that point, okay? You make the rules there na assuming na walang re-electionist, walang nanalo. That's why you can have like a clear rule to govern that. Okay? Sabihin natin, 17 nga, no? So, it means 16 kailangan mo. Sabihin natin, si Bato tsaka si Bongo na lang, huwag mo natin idami si Camille. Ade, bago lang pala si Camille. Si Bongo tsaka si Bato. O, yun lang yung mag-disagree. Si Aimee pa, di ba? Yun lang yung mag-disagree. Tapos na rin. It's a fool's errand. So, sabi mo, pwedeng i-carry over. Technically, it can nga. Okay? It can. It can. No problem. But it's a futile exercise nga. So, ngayon, because of that futility, that renders yung idea na it can carry over nonsense. Hindi nonsense, nonsense. They are using analogy kasi they don't have direct arguments. Yun nga yung problema. Yun nga yung problema. You have to put it in the rules. Ngayon, sabi natin magkikerry, di ba? Magkikerry sa 20. O ngayon, magbobotohan. Unless conviction is not the goal. Unless conviction is not the goal, you're right, Paps Chulo. Unless ipahiya lang si VP Sara Duterte. Then, futile kahit 2/3 kunin nila, 17.6 lang need mag-acquit. They have the numbers agad, not counting the swing. Kaya nga hindi pwede. Yun nga yung buong point
nila at hindi ang tungkulin nila sa impeachment trial. Sa Lunes, June 3, ipepresenta na ng House Prosecutors ang article of impeachment laban kay VP Duterte. Sabi ni Defensor, isang kasamaan lang nila ang magbabasa niyan sa Senado.
Sabi ni attorney, ano pa ipapahiya nyo? Nanapak na nga ng sheriff, goods pa din sa mga dito. Alam mo, tamo this is futile. Bakit? Ganito Let's say, sabihin natin yung 12. Sa 12 lang tayo. Sabihin natin, gusto mo lang ipahiya. Okay? Ano gagawin ni VP Sara? Hindi lang siya sasagot. Di convict nyo ako. Nagets nyo? Dog showing niya lang yung mga tao dun. Di wala rin. Parang tanga lang. What if, example, they will apply 2/3 of the remaining senators para ma-convict si VP? How can we deflect? Hindi, nakalagay 24 Senate Wala naman sinabing the rest. 2/3 of ano yan? 2/3 of 24. Parang ganito lang yan Gawin natin, Gawin natin ng mas malala to the extreme. Sabihin natin, ganito, sabihin natin ganito. Ito, malinaw na to Huwag natin i-carry over. Okay? Ganito yung sa tingnan. Huwag natin i-carry over. Sabihin natin kayang tapusin. Kinabukasan, magkakasama yung 12 sa aeroplano. Nag-crash. Boom! They're all dead. Now what? They should continue, right? Right? Tama ba? They should continue on judging. Tama ba? But is 12 enough to actually convict? Of course not. That's the idea. That's simple. Huwag natin i-replace. They died. Now what? You cannot replace them basta-basta, right? Ganun kasimple yung analogy, dude. Ganun kasimple. Sino ipapalit mo? Tamang-tama, walang na mas tama pa. Oh, that makes sense. 12 sa aeroplano sumakay. Nag-crash. Boom, they're dead. Sino papalit mo? Huwag natin lagay sa carry over. Yun na lang yung buong idea. They should continue, right? They should. They should continue. Lahat sila convict. Can you actually convict? No, so it's futile. So you have to terminate the impeachment. That's what's happening right now. Better luck next year na yan. Ganun kasimple, hindi ko maintindihan ang anong mahirap intindihin doon. Amo ulitin natin ha. Ulitin natin ang analogy. O hindi, yung hypotheticals natin. Magrasayang lang ng oras at pera, designated survivor. O, dito na. Namatay ngayon yung 12. Ano siya? O, judging na bukas. Damn. O. Birthday nung isa. Sa Davao. Punta sila sa Davao. May ano ngayon? Ande, unidentified weapon. Bring Harry home. No survivor. 12 na tira. Should they continue? You can if you want. But it's a futile exercise. Then it actually terminates itself. Yun yung point dito. Kung ang question mo is, can it cross over? It can. But it's a futile exercise. Then you should terminate it. Lesson. Huwag sila sasakay sa isang eroplano. Baka padrama lang to ng media outlets para malihis. Better luck next year mga taga-bundok. Yung US may golden curtain na. Tayo mag-ingis. Kung nanalo yung mga pambato ng admin nila, nagkaroon ng problema tungkol dyan. Ano? Pero gano'n lang kasimple yung problema. Baka ang aim lang talaga, kaya they are pushing for the trial not to convict, kung di siraan lang si Sara para bagsak pag 2028. Pwede naman 'yon. Well, para sa akin bagsak naman sa 2028 na kung merong mga lilitaw na iba, di ba? Paano kaya nangyari yan, namatay niya yung 12? Hoy, kadama sa Jordan, wag ka masyadong twisted, pre. Oh. Ito pa.
Ang Senate, ang Supreme Court,
Or
pero di naman nila tinuloy.
iba. But one can argue, iba naman yon, right? Iba ang batas doon, iba ang rules doon.
Sa US.
That's a defense of the House
Paki-fact check nga si Tito Sen kung tama yan na hindi nila tinuloy.
prosecutors and Supreme Court. Questioning, right? The crossover. Because
Justice of
yun ang
Peace.
tanong. Because in the United States, the impeachment court of Bill Clinton crossed two Congresses. So that's a defense of the House prosecutors.
Yeah, you can argue yung argument ni Tolentino.
To,
Kaso nga, ano ba sisiraan nila kay Sara? Yung mga anti-Sara. Actually, sa totoo lang, convicted na si VP Sara ngayon. Convicted na. Public opinion. Kaya ang dami ng mga memes Sara Lustay, yung she's already been convicted by public opinion. So, ano pa ilalakas nun? Impeach na nila sa lower Di ba? Na-impeach na nila sa lower Wala nang sense exactly.
judge Congresses. So
I-fact check nyo yan si Tito. Tito may issue yan dahil sa plagiarism. Gagi, layo naman.
that's a defense of the House prosecutors to justices as well. Nagpalit ang Kongreso in the US, tinuloy. But one can argue, iba naman yon, right? Iba ang batas doon, iba ang rules doon.
Correct. Iba.
Oh.
Saka, if I'm not mistaken, nag-crossover nga pero di naman nila tinuloy.
See? Kung ang question nga, can it cross over? It can. Kasi yung 12, yung 12 buhay pa naman. Yung 12 senators, kaso ang problema nga, katulad ng sinabi ko, paano ko ba explain ng pinakasimple to? Yung kanina pagkaka-explain ko na namatay yung 12, ngayon, can they actually continue it? They can. But it actually defeats itself. So, it extinguishes itself because it's nonsense na. So ngayon, it's the same, it has the same argument, it has the same effect. Yun na yun. It's an exercise in futility. Yun nga, di ba? Yun na nga yung idea eh. Yun na mismo eh. Siguro doon ko lang siya kayang maano ng pinakasimple.
Oo. Now, if the Supreme Court makes a decision, hypothetical to, and says you need to continue, does that take precedence over the Senate being a
Ito magandang tanong to.
co-equal?
Kapag ang Supreme Court is sinabi they have to continue, ito yung problema. I don't think the Supreme Court can do that. Especially if pumunta ng 20th Congress, tapos nagbotohan, yung nagbotohan, nanalo yung to just terminate it. I don't think the Supreme Court can do it. I don't think the Supreme Court can do shit. It's just me. I don't know. Kasi co-equal sila. Separate sila. If dumaan sa proseso ng botohan and they terminated it, that's a political, exercise. I don't think the Supreme Court can do shit. Ang nakikita ko na lang na value dyan is yung chance for some of the senators to grandstand either or against Sara.
You need to continue. Does that take precedence over the Senate being a co-equal branch, or the
I don't think that's overreaching.
Supreme Court has no say?
Very good question. Ang ganda. That is a very good question. I have not thought of that. Susundin ba namin ng Supreme Court o hindi?
Yun ang magandang tanong. Susundin nyo ba Supreme Court o hindi? Sorry, pero I don't think na the Supreme Court would even attempt. I'm sorry. Iiwanan niya sa kanila. The Supreme Court will be silent on that one. That's my suspicion na.
Yan ang tanong doon.
You are co-equal.
No, wait.
They don't need to. Tapos co-equal pa. Exactly. Tapos terminate pa. Kahit ano may decision doon, moot and academic na lang yon. Sa side nila, da? As per Tolentino, sa Constitution, 2/3 of the... happy fan. Hindi ka nanood ng content ko, no? Okay.
No, wait. The Senate pwedeng unahan ng Senate ang Supreme Court. Pwedeng unahan ng Senate. On day 1, July 28, nag-convene ang Senate. Somebody stands up and discusses it. Talks about it. Sabi, do you think by July 28 may decision na Supreme Court dyan? Wala pa.
That is true. And then magbotohan sila. Ang problema kasi, kapag nag-carry over, kung gusto mo kasi ipilit yung carry over sa 20th Congress, they're gonna have to vote on it. If they have to vote on it, it's not the same as continuing it. Kasi lumalabas ngayon, nag-stop ngayon yung continuation ng impeachment doon sa time na magbobotohan sila. Nagigets yung point? Kasi merong isa, yung si Dodge Damlies, sabi niya pwedeng i-carry over sa 20th Congress. No, they're they're gonna have to vote on that one. If they actually vote on that one, doon ka nag-stop, doon yung limit mo ng pag-crossover. Hanggang doon ka lang. Kasi kung pwede mag-crossover yan, they don't have to vote on it. If they actually have to vote on it, then it means talo ka na sa crossover. Because they have to vote on it.
Malamang, humingi pa ng ano yun, humingi ng comment from us, or from from the Senate, from the House. Di ba? Ganyan pa yun eh. O kung pangunahan ng Senado, July 28, i-discuss na kagad ng Senado. Sabihin ng Senado, hindi kami continuing. Ayun.
Exactly. Exactly. Tama. What if that happens? Magiging moot and academic na lang yung sa Supreme Court. That will be the rule after they create the rule. Yeah.
Tapos. Diba? Pwedeng ganun eh. Depends on the members of the Senate. It's not it is
Okay.
not the Senate President alone.
Okay. Now, my last question is this. You were there for the impeachment trial of Estrada and
Sabi ni Kong Marcoleta, kung tatawid yan sa 20th Congress, pagdedebatihan muna nila yan at handa siya doon. Yun nga. The fact na kailangan pagdebatihan, effectively, it didn't carry over. Because there shouldn't be any voting to kung carry over or not. It must be automatic. Kapag siya mong mag-carry over, tapos they have to vote on it, no, doon nag-stop yung carry over argument mo. Because they have to vote on it. Na-guess yun, nakasalalay pa rin sa kanila. So it doesn't carry over kasi nakasalalay sa kanila.
Corona.
Yes.
It's a political exercise in the end, right? It's a political exercise.
Which we learned in the second impeachment.
Yes.
In the first
Okay.
impeachment, we were tied down to
You were good. You were great. This sa first.
the rules of court.
No.
Kaya.
Ganun eh.
Ang tanong ko, because when I interview the House prosecutors in the end, they talk about, of course, that this is an accountability measure, right? It is an accountability measure for people in higher office, officials in higher office. And at the end of the day, you have a vice president who refuses to explain.
Pwede naman mag-start sa 28th Congress na eh. Hindi nga carry over na yon. Kailangan na sa 19 kung kailan na-receive eh. Kung kailan yung pag-transmit, pag-refer eh. Hindi na nga pwede teacher ed naman eh. Ibig sabihin, it will be considered as new. So hindi na carry over yon. Nagets mo? So hindi na siya carry over.
How she spent her confidence.
Pero ang problema nga doon, pagbobotohan pa rin nila yon. Di ba? Kung pagbobotohan pa rin nila yon, ay problema pa rin.
Confidential funds. Will that matter to the senators? It refuses to explain how she spent her confidential funds. Will that matter to the senators?
It depends on the prosecution on how they will present it.
Yeah, pero technically na. Manali file impeachment next year bawal.
Is that a violation of the rules? Is that has she violated any rule of the Senate or the Constitution? Kasi ang charges na sa Constitution, remember, betrayal of public.
Yes. Yeah.
Di ba yung ano ba ito?
But do you believe the results of the midterm elections will affect how the senators will even vote if the trial should continue in the 20th Congress?
It will definitely affect yung mga na-elect ha.
Na-elect na.
Tapos na yan eh. Tapos na yan. Ang bantayan mo yung mga re-electionist. Sila ang mag-iisip mabuti kung paano gagawin. Dahil on 2028, re-elect.
Totoo, tama yon. yung re-electionist talaga mag-ano dyan. Oo, yung re-electionist ang medyo mamamangka sa dalawang ilog. Yung mga re-electionist talaga mamamangka sa dalawang ilog. Kasi yun itong mga nanalo na, tapos na yan. Ang kailangan nandiyan, ang kailangan nandiyan magtimbang is yung re-electionist. Kung kanino sila mas madikit at mas mataas yung percentage na mananalo sila. Kaya doon nagkakaroon ng problema. Okay? So anyway, yun lang naman. Sana na-explain ko sa inyo yung sa aeroplano. It's so twisted pero sana make sense sa inyo. That's the idea of that is the reason why mati-terminate siya or because of the futility of it. So, fool's errand siya. Kaya siya, technically, pwedeng mag-carry over nga. Kung gusto mo, kung ipipilit mo, pwede. Pwede tapusin nyo. 12 senators na lang matitira. Okay? Ang problema, hindi nga rin mag-work kasi it cannot create a quorum, di ba? Hindi, it can create kasi kung mag-start ka ngayon, pwede kasi yung mga lumang ano, di ba? Yung mga lumang senators, pwede pa rin naman. Pero pag sa judging ka na, tas lumagpas ka, 12 na lang yung matitira. Parang na-deads yung 12. So, ibig sabihin, pwede ka pa rin naman mag-judge kung gusto mo eh. Pero acquittal na yon. Matic acquitted yun. Gets nyo? Kaya siya mati-terminate. Kaya yung sinasabi ni Tito Sotto kayo sa US na hindi raw tinuloy, i-fact check nyo yun. Baka ganun nga nangyari. Na-terminate siya. So anyway, God bless sa inyo lahat. Bye-bye.